Our show's what you know. We'll always watch TV. And if you think we can't, we'll watch more and you'll see. That's why the people of the web believe in Jim from Las Vegas and Jakob from Sweden.
Shows What You Know, your television podcast. I am Jim from Las Vegas.
And I'm Jakob from Sweden. Welcome back to another episode of the ChimpCast, where we're talking about chimp crazy. We're the only ones to do it, except there is actually an official Chimp Crazy podcast. One for the podcast about television, which you can find at showswhatyouknow.com.
Is there actually a Chimp Crazy official podcast?
Yes,
I was going to say, don't say that at the beginning of our show, because now everyone just clicked away, and they're like, oh, yeah, shit, all right, thanks, guys, see you later.
Well, the thing is, no one seems to be talking about Chimp Crazy except us, and Tooth and Claw, which is the official Chimp Crazy podcast with Tooth and Claw. But you're going to have to wait for later and for the podcast about television to find out more about this thing. You certainly can't go and find it on youtube.com on the official HBO account.
Not to put my Tapat hat on. That's the podcast about television, another podcast we host where we do discuss other podcasts that discuss television. Are Tooth and Nail, are those people? Is it like, I'm Tooth and I'm Nail, and we're here to talk about Chimp Crazy?
Well, so it's actually, I think it's a different podcast called Tooth and Claw. So they've recruited Wes Larson, a biologist, wildlife expert, and co-host of Tooth and Claw, and then he speaks with Eric Good and Jeremy McBride about the dangers of keeping chimpanzees in captivity, etc., etc. So, yeah.
Well, in my opinion, there's no point hearing from them about it because you watch the show and you hear from them. So stick with us. We are going to talk a little bit about Chimp Crazy, probably one of the best docuseries right now that you're not watching. But before that, we're going to talk a little bit about the news and some other stuff we've been watching. So real quick news, though. This broke like right after we recorded last week's episode. Big news in the TV world. I mean, especially in the Shows Which You Know orbit, because we recently just discussed season 1 of this show. But the Acolyte is canceled. There will be no season 2. Now, there's the weird thing about this, and I saw people trying to do this, which is a little annoying. I don't know if it was the production company or if it was Disney or if it was just kind of like the stands out there, but they were like, well, technically, the Acolyte was only ever picked up as one season, and there were only light talks about a season 2, so it wasn't actually canceled. They just decided not to pick it up. Now, what do you think about soft language like that, Jacob?
I think it's a very different story when you're watching Shogun, a series that just concludes and you're basically like, this is left at a very satisfying and natural end point. It's entered as a mini-series in the Emmys, etc. And then you're like, oh, well, actually, this is a terrible example because they decided to do season 2, didn't they? Yeah. So, but the point is, this is not a concluded story in the same way that Shogun is. Or maybe they, hey, if that's what they were going for, they failed because it was not a satisfying ending. So, or it wasn't a satisfying journey overall, I would say. But then maybe I'm putting on my...
I think you're a little too
overly
harsh.
Critical hat here. Yeah. Okay, well...
I
wasn't upset to see it. I was like, it's a bit of a waste. They spent so much time and money and energy and put the story together. But at the same time, I was like, it wasn't that good. This is not like Bring Back Firefly. People are signing petitions. I'm like, it was fine, and it cost $180 million. So, I don't know.
I mean, I thought it was overall good. I mean, again, I wouldn't say it was like amazing, but I think for at least my old style of thinking is genre shows. Season 1 is always just giving you a little hint of a promise as everyone settles in and the world is established. Oh, this is the world of Star Wars. You don't have to establish a lot of stuff. And then you everything ramps up with season 2 and season 3. So, I mean, I get what you're saying. I can't really disagree with you, but I do think season 1 was pretty good. And I do think a lot of elements of that ending would have been fine with like things left open, but not. I wouldn't be too upset as far as it being like no season 2. But I mean, the biggest thing is the dumb. And I didn't like this in the finale, anyways. I guess kind of spoiler alert. So they did a quick like mid-credit scene where you see Yoda, as one of our characters walks in to be like, "Master, we need you" or something. So they definitely were hinting at a season 2. But I mean, as far as if you wanted to tell a story and be like, and then things kept going on, but we're not necessarily telling that story, it wouldn't be that bad of an ending, in my opinion. But I get what you're saying. But they also clearly wanted a season 2. They clearly were setting up to do a season 2.
Yeah, I guess maybe that's more what I was going for. But yeah, do you think that it was canceled because of all the people who hated it for the wrong reasons, or because of all the people who hated it for the right reasons? Why do you think they canceled the show?
Well, from my understanding, it's one of the lowest watched things that they've put out. So, I mean, I don't think that really helps that much. I mean, maybe not the low. I mean, I think Disney Plus has had a lot of stinkers. They had like a Turner and Hooch show at one point. I don't even know if you know what Turner and Hooch is. It was like a Tom Hanks movie with him as a cop bonding with a dog. And they did like a show about his son bonding with like a new dog or something. Or they did like a
That sounds great.
They did like a
Let's
Mighty
talk about it
Ducks.
next week. I watched the Mighty Ducks one. I watched some of it, and then I was
Yeah.
like, this doesn't work.
I don't think
I wanted it to
watched-
be.
Yeah.
I wanted it to be Cobra Kai. Like I was fully, and they were fully
Yes.
trying to Cobra Kai it, but it just didn't fully. I don't know. It didn't pull me along that much. Maybe I didn't have enough nostalgia for it.
Oh my God, you unlocked a memory. I did watch an episode of that because didn't we were maybe going to talk about it or something like that. Because
I watched
of
like
the
half
Cobra
the
Kai
first
thing.
season. Yeah. I think
And
we.
because Lauren Graham's on the show, right?
Yes.
That's
she's
why
the
I
mom
watched
of
it.
like one of the new kids or whatever. Yeah.
I'm just
But
double
anyway.
But either way, yeah, they've had some. I think of their Star Wars things, it was one of the least watched shows. So yeah, I don't think that helped. I mean, whatever it might be. I mean, whether you hated it, whether you loved it, whether you were just kind of whatever on it. Is this another? I think this point's been proven many times, but is this just another another nail in the coffin of the idea of like Star Wars being able to expand from its traditional characters and lore that we already know? Like, is that just basically a dead end as far as Star? Because no matter what, like, say it was very good, people would probably still have been upset about changes or things that you do, right?
Yeah, and it's like we get annoyed at big companies for going back to the same wells over and over. Like we're like, okay, fine. If you're only going to make Star Wars and like Marvel superhero stuff, at least do interesting different things. And they try to do that, and then everyone's like, fuck you. And they're like, here's Deadpool. And we're like, yay. Yeah. So we are definitely the chumps. But I was trying to find some of them numbers like you were talking about as far as like viewership. It's obviously always a bit hard to figure out, but I did see a fun fact here that while Andor cost more to make, the first season of Andor cost $250 million, the Acolyte still per minute costs more. The Acolyte cost $671,000 per minute. And Andor is just $529, so that's a bargain.
Yeah. Well, because I mean, luckily Andor, I think they had already like started filming, and it was already like greenlit as however like 16 episodes or whatever it's supposed to be. Because I mean, because Andor, that's a great example. Although I guess it didn't have the same like fury behind some of the hatred for it, but I do think a lot of like traditional Star Wars fans, even though a lot of people that are necessarily not really Star Wars fans are like, this is great, we love this.
Yeah.
Some of the more traditional were like, nah, I don't really like it, because I mean, I'm not trying to be this holier than thou, like, oh, there's no lightsabers, so that's why they didn't like it. But like that's part of it. It didn't have lightsabers, it didn't have Force guys and all that stuff. It was about the rebellion and the downtrodden and like the power structures. So yeah, I don't think even though like I loved it and thought it was amazing, it doesn't seem like that was like a ratings hit either. Let me see. Okay, yeah, it was. Yeah, I think I'm looking at the same thing you saw, like as far as minutes watched, because with streaming
Yeah.
too, they'll hide this shit. But it was the number 10 spot on the finale. You would think some of these shows they would at least, even though like a lot of shows have big premieres and then they fade a bit, but usually they'll like peak back up once there's a finale because then people get caught up or it shows if there's excitement. But it seems like it was just dropping every week.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm looking at some data. This is, as you said, it's streaming, so everything is so secretive. Looking for something. I'm looking at something from Luminate Data, I guess, that has published a sort of deep dive into viewership statistics for all the Star Wars shows and sort of looking at the total minutes watched for the first 12 weeks, sort of after a show is published. And The Mandalorian Season 3 is very much at the top there, followed by Book of Boba Fett, Obi-Wan Kenobi. This is a bit of a dip down to Andor and Ashoka. Ashoka seems to be doing much, much better than the Acolyte. But I think this was also coming out while the Acolyte was still coming out, so it's not really super reliable. But yeah, it's definitely interesting. Andor is actually good, which is weird. But I guess that's why people outside of Star Wars, like I've said that to people who don't like Star Wars, like, no, you could watch this. You could actually watch this. You don't have to be so deep into the lore that you're like, the lightsabers, you know? Like,
yeah. I mean, it's for lack of a better comparison, because it's almost like how Game of Thrones initially had that hump of like, oh, no. I mean, yeah, they talk about dragons and shit, but there's no dragons on it. Like, you can watch it because there was that initial hump. I think people forget before it became like one of the biggest shows. Part of the intrigue was that it was, yes, this fantastical genre world, but that wasn't really the focus. Of course, it was the tits and ass and cock, and everyone loved it.
Yeah, people pitched it as fantasy for people who don't like fantasy. I think even the books may have been like referred to as that as well previously, but yeah.
And so that's kind of what Andor goes for, and I think even the main like showrunner creator is even like kind of admittedly like, yeah, I'm not really that into Star Wars, and if anything that's a kind of a good thing. But I mean, it almost feels like the lesson to be learned would be, okay, let's chill on Star Wars for a while, you know, but that's never gonna be the thing. You would think you'd want to like, let's chill on Star Wars, let's let people miss it and remember what they liked about it, and then maybe we'll come back with something really good. But I mean, we got Mandalorian and Grogu movie coming out. We got another Ahsoka season. I mean, I'm excited for Skeleton Crew. I hope that does well. I hope it both does well and is very good, but it is also kind of different. So we'll have to see how that plays out.
Yeah, it doesn't even take that long for people to get nostalgic. Like, I feel like I can't think of a specific example, but we were talking about something the other week where I was like, that's from like not that long ago, but people are already like, let's bring it back. And I'm like, maybe we should bring it back. And it's like, it's just barely past the point where it would be just another season. And it's like, no, it's a reboot. We're doing a thing. But I think the Acolyte unfortunately had two things working against it, right? So it was not the standard thing that everyone wanted and expected. It wasn't following all the same boring tropes and things that you always see. And it was what else? It was also not great. That was it's almost like Andor. Maybe it was slightly off the beaten path, but it was also so good that it made up for it. And it seems like the lesson they're gonna take is not at all what you said. The lesson they're going to take is like, let's just keep doing as cookie cutter stuff as we can, because even when it's bad, even when everyone agrees that it's bad and empirically complains about it, people get hella views on their YouTube videos complaining about it. We get hella views because people watch the thing. Because that's the difference, I think. People watched all of the Book of Boba Fett, even if they didn't like it. They watched all of Obi-Wan, even if they didn't like it. But people seem to have tapped out of the Acolyte because they didn't follow that same path that they're supposed to as a Star Wars show.
Well, and also the problem, like with the Mandalorian got worse and worse as they started bringing in characters from like Dave Filoni's stuff. And I mean, I know I'm kind of an outlier as a Star Wars fan, but I think of Dave Filoni as more of like a fan fiction guy. Like I think all his stuff is fan fiction to me, even though technically, yeah, it's canon. He's the guy. He's George's Sith apprentice or whatever the fuck you want to say. But I mean, I guess it's easy for me to say because I didn't really watch Rebels and I don't really know a lot about Ahsoka. But I feel like what was great about The Mandalorian initially, I mean, even though, yeah, we had a baby Yoda, which was kind of cool and familiar, but we didn't have, you know, Luke Skywalker and we didn't have fucking people we know running around. And then it just got worse and worse with that. You know, they brought in Boba Fett. They brought in Luke Skywalker, which would have been kind of fine as in that one moment when he just takes Grogu away or whatever. But then, of course, they were like, well, we need Grogu back. So what the fuck is going on? Get Grogu back. We need to put out a movie called The Mandalorian and Grogu. We need The Mandalorian to be the Forrest Gump of the Star Wars universe, and he's going to interact with every character we've ever heard of before. So I don't know, and if that viewership got higher, then that means they're going to be like, even though the Solo movie did bad, how else can we CG Harrison Ford to make him young and have him come back? How can we bring in more of these characters that we know? So
whose body are we shaking out of the coffin next?
Yeah. So I don't know. You've heard the Star Wars rants. You've heard them all before. That's the Star Wars rant. We're gonna have Star Wars long after our deaths.
Yeah, just wait like a couple of weeks. We'll be talking about some new Star Wars show. The Acolyte dies, so Skeleton Crew can live.
Yeah, and I do say all that, but I am legitimately excited for Skeleton Crew. So we'll see. Other news. Chick-fil-A. Now, you don't have Chick-fil-A, do you, in Ireland or Sweden, huh?
No, we don't have Chick-fil-A, Jim.
So Chick-fil-A
I already know that I'm just sighing because you told me that what this news item is beforehand, so I'm sighing preemptively. Please continue.
Yeah, Chick-fil-A is launching a streaming service, according to Variety, and they even say, yes, you read that right. Chick-fil-A, yes, that Chick-fil-A. They're looking to launch a streaming platform. For people that don't know, Chick-fil-A is a fast food, you know, chicken sandwiches, waffle fries. They got great lemonade. I mean, their food's really good, because it's that nice border of like usually fast food is just garbage. I mean, like
this is why they're doing. Shut the fuck up, Jim. This is why they're doing it. This is free advertisement that you're getting. You're like, you know, usually fast food's not that nice. Like, are you like? This is why. This is clearly why. I don't know anything about it, but it's just like clearly this. But anyway, yeah, go on.
But that's
Tell me about
genius.
the waffle fries.
That's
it is genius. I agree. We don't have to be complicit.
This is a genius idea. We do, because I enjoy myself some Chick-fil-A.
Wow. My name's Jim Scampoli. This is my favorite Chick-fil-A on the Citadel.
Well, also, I guess they haven't learned the lessons because it feels like most of these networks that launch streaming services, it always feels like a few months into it. Like even Disney, they're all like, fuck, we regret this. Like
that was
Plus.
their most recent press release, wasn't it? Shit.
Yeah.
Acolyte canceled. Also, what the fuck?
Yeah, like Apple TV Plus. I mean, and the other thing I was gonna bring, I was gonna bring this up later, but I think I read that Apple TV Plus is watched by like 0.5% of viewers or something like that. Like their viewership is extremely low. And like here we are trying to launch our podcast and like all we talk about are Apple TV Plus shows that nobody's fucking watching.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, you always hear about these companies and they're like, we regret it. It feels like the move should have been, and I think it's almost what Sony's doing, is you just keep making your stuff and then license it to Netflix, license it to Hulu, whoever the fuck. Let them deal with it. Let them pay you for your stuff. But anyways, Jacob, you could be onto something. This could just be a nice pie in the sky to get some eyeballs on Chick-fil-A. But let's see. They're working with the Hollywood production companies and studios to create family-friendly, mostly unscripted original shows. They're in talks to license and acquire content. One of such programs is a game show from Glassman Media, who did NBC's The Wall, and Sugar 23, who produced Netflix's 13 Reasons Why. They've been given a 10-episode order. It's great because they don't even say like what it's for. Like, here's that episode order. The budget for unscripted are around $400,000 per half hour. Chick-fil-A is also considering scripted projects as well as animation. Top Gear and the X Factor alum Brian Gibson is leading the charge on programming. So yeah, Chick-fil-A, of course, known for their fried chicken sandwiches and waffle fries. Looking to break into the reality TV business, which has shrunk in the past few years. I've seen this kind of a thought passed around a bit, actually, recently in an interview with a producer for The Challenge. It's almost like the old onus of like the reality show being cheaper is changing a bit. I think maybe it's because some of these reality shows, I mean, especially something like The Challenge, they're actually having returning cast members and like they kind of build a profile up. So now, and if you know anything about The Challenge, and I'm sure this works with other reality shows, is they're getting an appearance fee, or they're getting paid outside of whatever the prize on the show is. And as you start to build up a reputation or like a fan favorite, I'm sure you can start asking for more money. And it's almost like dealing with the cast on a television show at that point.
Yeah, and looking back, it used to be like people would go on reality TV to kind of get a name, and then they'd get big like on social media from that. And now it's kind of like, whoa, we're doing a reality show. We better get some people who are big on social media on our reality show because that's who people want to watch. So it's kind of like you have to pay. Like, you have to be a kingmaker, but as soon as you make them a king, you better have already locked them into a multiple-year contract, which is more often the case, obviously, with fiction shows, not with reality TV. So anyway, I'm sure we'll be signed to Chick-fil-A in no time.
Well, which is wild because, yeah, I mean, even like, again, like I pay attention to the Challenge universe, and you hear from cast members that say the production company will actively go out of their way to make sure you can't go on other shows and stuff like that. Even though in the end it could be it's beneficial, honestly, for both, because someone like, again, to keep it with The Challenge, CT is a character who's been on The Challenge for 20 years at this point. But he was recently on Traitors, which was a big show. I mean, here on, what is it, on Paramount or Peacock? It's one of those. I know it's like a British show originally, I believe. But
you're saying he was a traitor from the Challenge universe, and he went over to.
Yeah, they let him go on Traitors, but I feel like all that. I mean, yes, that builds his profile, so he's more of a character. But I feel like from people I've interacted with that have never watched The Challenge, now they're asking me about it because they're like, "Oh, I'm interested in this character. I want to see more of him." So it feels like it should be beneficial for both. But all the production companies thinking like, now we're gonna have to pay him an extra $60,000 or whatever the fuck. You know what I mean? So it is.
Well, they're probably asking you about it because you're always wearing your "Ask Me About the Challenge" T-shirt.
Very true. Yep. Now, I guess Chick-fil-A did previously produce a series of short animated films called Stories of Evergreen Hills, and they launched Penny Cake. It's a brand of children games and puzzles.
This is so now that kind of touches more on like the only way that this actually makes sense is to have it like a free streaming thing, like have your kids watch it and have the characters all be Chick-fil-A foods and have a shit ton of cute coupons, turn whatever shitty app you have for Chick-fil-A into this streaming thing that has a bunch of videos and a bunch of shit in there that no one gives a shit about. But then you also have coupons and things like that, and you have to watch the full animated fucking chicken go to get breaded, and then you get the free chicken or whatever the fuck. That's how it should work.
Well, if my memory serves correct, on a little show called Blank Meets Blank, we pitched almost something exactly like this, but it was like soda brands. It was like freestyle rappers, but they were all based on different flavors of soda, right? Was that what it was?
Yeah. Well, Pepsi versus Coke was kind of the big one there, and I did write the rap, but this was pre-ChatGPT. I crafted that shit by hand. I was like, I think we have something here, Jim. Yeah, that's our show, Blank Meets Blank, where we make up new concepts for TV shows. Check it out at showswhichyouknow.com.
It's not the first non-entertainment company to enlist in the streaming wars, as brands like Lyft and Airbnb have previously staked a claim in the space. Bob the drag queen hosted a game show, Lucky Lift, for the rideshare service, while MTV aired an Airbnb-produced show called Gay Chorus Deep South. Chick-fil-A's 3,000 plus restaurants boast the highest per store sales of any fast food chain in the U.S. Wow, 3,000 locations. Jesus.
You're like, wow, what a respectable brand. This is the. Have you heard of or seen the Chicken Shop Date show where this comedian lady interviews a bunch of people, but she does it in the format of a date in sort of a fried chicken shop?
I have not, no.
That is the only thing that would make sense on this platform. If they did if honestly, I'll eat my words. If everything they do is kind of set inside a Chick-fil-A, if they do like a dumb, like people used to do web shows on YouTube like 15 years ago, but it's all set in a Chick-fil-A and it's all on theme, I'm like, okay, I know it's a gimmick, but at least you did something. Like someone in the marketing department was like, let's do a thing. And I'm like, fair play. Hopefully they can move on to work at Disney Plus and go, fuck, why do we have a streaming service?
That would be kind of fun in my opinion, but we'll see. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty basically all the news we have, right?
I believe so. That's the main bits.
What TV shows have you been watching? Tell me, I gotta know.
Now, before we get into Chimp Crazy, to keep it on brand, though, I did watch Bad Monkey, new Apple TV Plus show that no one's watching. From Bill Lawrence, the creator of Scrubs, and starring Vince Vaughn. I'm not sure. I know there's at least 2 episodes out there. Maybe they're at 3 or 4 at this point. I've only watched the first episode. I like it, but it's hard to really recommend. And I almost wonder if like this is part of Apple TV's problem, is that I can see that there's a good show here, and maybe this is a benefit. This is a pro for the show, is that the show's patient. Like they're not, like they're just letting you kind of simmer in what's happening. I mean, the basic gist is it's almost like a, it's a sunny noir type show, because we got Vince Vaughn is this detective who is now, he's suspended. He's a suspended detective. It's got Big Lebowski vibes a little bit, but not as like, the dude is just a bumbling fool. Like Vince Vaughn's character isn't that, but he is a guy that lives in the Florida Keys and he hangs out at the beach all the time and he's chill, but he's also like, he's gonna do the right thing, even though maybe other people or even his bosses might want him to do the wrong thing. But the show is very chill with like, they set up this mystery kind of. They take a long time, and even by the end, it's not like there are shows that they really focus on, like, this is a pilot. We want to hook you in and we want you to watch the next one. And there are small elements of that here, but it's left so vague that I could see a lot of people checking this out, and it's like 58 minutes, checking this out and being like, I don't know about that, or maybe even like not making it through the whole thing, because it mostly coasts off the charm of Vince Vaughn, which is good, but then it's the elements, they're still too separate to really like hook you. I mean, I don't want to be too negative, because I do like it and I like what they're going for, but I'm just surprised that you don't see the urgency you've seen in the past, even with network shows where the premiere is like bang, 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 hook, 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 let's go. Like what? Like you want to watch this fucking show, and you don't get that here. And I don't know if that's because it's like, hey, Apple TV's giving us money, we're making a fucking show, let's go. So it's I'm coming back with kind of mixed feelings on this. Did you get a chance to watch this or no?
No, I have not. Is it like Scrubs Bill Lawrence, or like Ted Lasso Bill Lawrence, or Shrinking Bill Lawrence? Like, what's the? Because when you said it was 58 minutes, I was like, huh, what?
Yeah. I haven't watched Shrinking, so I don't know how it compares to that. It's not really Scrubs or Ted Lasso. I mean, there's humor in it, because Vince Vaughn, of course, is always just throwing out one-liners at people. It's almost like going for a. I mean, obviously it's not this, because Veronica Mars takes place in a high school, but that's like my close encapsulation of it, because it is very much a detective story, like the basic hook. But there's a narrator, which is a little distracting, which kind of gives me the Big Lebowski vibes a little bit, because it's this other character is like narrating what's happening in a way. But it starts out, there's a smarmy rich guy who's fishing for the first time on his honeymoon. He's treating his new bride like shit, and he thinks he caught a fish, and he ends up pulling out a severed arm out of the water. And it's a severed arm, and he's got a wedding ring on, and he's given the finger. And there's a running gag of how they keep saying, like, oh, that's random rigor mortis. Like, that happens sometimes. It's just rigor mortis happened to set that way. And then it's like this arm starts traveling, like then Vince Vaughn has it. And it's like, we got to dump this somewhere else. We don't want this on our books. We don't want to scare the tourists away from the Keys. Like, we're just a sleepy Florida Keys town. Get this up to Miami with the big city fucks, And it just kind of spirals from there. But I was hoping it was going to be more something like, okay, here's the arm. I was hoping it was going to be more procedural of like, here's the arm, and by the end we have a resolution, and then we're going to have fun stories like that episode to episode. Like, again, maybe that's my old school nostalgia kicking in, wanting something more like that. But no, it's like we're still with the arm by the end of the episode. And then we have the narrator introduces this whole other character that's in the Bahamas that's faintly connected. And then, but like, obviously it's connected, but the reveal at the end is the narrator's like, you know what? I hope you don't realize, like, I haven't been telling you two stories. I've been telling you one. And then they show that there's a connection. It's like, yeah, no shit. I fucking assumed all this time we're spending with another character that it's connected. So, I mean, it's to be seen how it starts to play out in later episodes, but it felt like a show that expected you to already be on board, rather than trying to win you over in a pilot episode.
I think that might be the detriment of several Apple TV shows. Like you said, like, it's good that they give creators this freedom. Like, I'm not going to be opposed to it, but it's also, you have the hankering. You want like a procedural. You want a monster of the week. You want something. We want something like that, but we don't get anything like that. The thing is, Apple TV is also releasing them week to week, right? But you kind of got to have that hook. Like, say what you want about Netflix, their quality is very variable in their own productions. But at least early on with their Netflix originals, they always pulled you into the next episode with some hook at the end of each episode, because they knew that's how they were going to build that habit in you to stick around. Oh, I'll just watch a little bit more. You got to have something like that. And especially if you're going week to week, that's happened. It's so many Apple TV shows where I watched like 4 episodes, or like, because they release 3 and then there's one after that, and I watch them, and then I'm just like, yeah, there's no more episodes. I guess I'll catch up later. And then I never think about it ever again.
Yeah.
That happens to me all the time. And I saw Bad Monkey, like, because I'm one of the 8 people that goes on Apple TV, and I saw Bad Monkey on there, and I'm like, this is probably fine. But it didn't, there's nothing in the concept or even in what you told me that I'm like, there's no clear hook. Nothing has pulled me into even the first episode from the description and from the graphics. And I'm sure it's a well put together show. And, if we had 10% of the amount of TV shows that we have, I'm sure I'd really enjoy it. But I'm also like, well, maybe I'm just going to watch something else,
Yeah. Like I was saying, I kind of appreciate the fact that they're like confident enough to, let the story kind of play out. Like, and they almost, in a weird way, it's showing respect for the audience, kind of. But then again, it's also like you gotta imagine, and maybe this is like, here we are, we're online creators. We understand that you have to almost have like a 6-second hook at the very beginning of a video to be like, and then this happened, and then cut back to the beginning and hope a viewer doesn't click away. But like, I appreciate that they're confident, but then they appreciate my intelligence to like stick around. But also you need something to grab you, especially in a pilot of a brand new show.
You're like, come on, I'm not that intelligent. Give me something to work with here.
Yeah, come on. So yeah, there's that.
What TV shows have you been watching? Tell me, I gotta know.
Jacob?
I just said there's no monster of the week, but you know what? I have been rewatching The Witcher Season 1. Did you ever consume any
Ooh.
Witcher content? Did you play any of the Witcher games? Any of this stuff?
Nope,
Okay.
nope. Don't know anything about the books. Don't know anything about the show, the games, whatever.
Okay, well, let me tell you a little bit
Wait.
about it.
I
Oh.
do know, isn't there a game they play? What's the game they play in the game? Like
Oh,
a
yeah,
gambling?
Ghent.
Yeah.
the card game.
My brother was big into Ghent. He would just play that.
Yeah, a lot of that happened to a lot of people. But yeah, so The Witcher, it's basically a series of books that are kind of weirdly structured. It's kind of a lot of short stories, and I've read. I think I read like one of the short story collections or whatever. But it's kind of like the basic concept is that there's this character who's the Witcher, and he's traveling around a very Eastern European inspired sort of folk tale fantasy world where, you know, there's tremendous racism against the elves and a lot of interpolitic between a bunch of different kingdoms, but basically like he's like a cowboy, right? He's like a specter in Mass Effect or whatever, and he travels from town to town and he kills monsters. And there's a couple of other important characters and things like that, but that's the gist of the books in the shortest way possible. And the books were turned into a very successful series of video games. I actually played The Witcher 2 back in the day, and I didn't get on The Witcher 3 when it came out, but it was a massive hit from, is it CD Projekt Red? Does that sound right? Who also made, yeah.
It sounds right, although I don't know. It sounds like a game studio. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I'm just pulling this from the back of my brain. So, oh yeah, they did.
Okay.
So basically, very successful. The third game, which I wanted to play but like didn't have the hardware for or whatever, or the time. And then eventually, way later, I got the Switch version. And then a little while, but I actually have the map of the world from The Witcher is one of the many maps hanging on my wall. If you go to youtube.com/showswhatyouknow, you can kind of see it there, which I got in some collector's edition for the Switch that I got. But I was basically I got this hankering a little while ago because I don't play video games. Like I always say, I just look like I play video games. I have the vibe like I should play video games.
Yeah.
But I was like, you know what? I kind of got a hankering to go back to The Witcher, and I played a little bit of it on the Switch. And I got to tell you, it doesn't look great because it's ported to the Switch and it's just not built for it, especially not on a big TV. And I'm like, I know this game looks gorgeous, or at least pretty good on like a proper console or whatever. But also I can hold it in my hand. So I've been playing that a little bit, but I was also like, you know what? I watched season 1 of The Witcher when it came out, and I enjoyed it. And then I watched season 2, and I was like, it was fine. And then I started season 3 and never finished it. There are 3 seasons out currently. The last one just came out last year. But I was like, you know what? Might go back to this, check it out again. And yeah, season 1 of The Witcher, it's very good. It's very like, it kind of has a Buffy the Vampire Slayer or whatever. It has a Monster of the Week kind of feel to it, and is basically like, beforehand, I think people were thinking like, is this going to be like a new Game of Thrones or whatever? They were putting a lot of money into it, you know? And I think if you go into it expecting that, that's just not what you're going to get. It's a lot more cheesy than that, but cheesy with a sort of relatively high production value. Not crazy high, because there's some battles and things and some CG stuff where you're like, that was, they did what they could with what they had going there. But overall, I really enjoy the way it looks. The interesting thing about the first season, and I guess less so in seasons after it, but because of the structure of the books, where it's just a bunch of short stories that kind of interconnect over time, that feeling also exists there in the show, where you're following 3 different timelines, but they never say what timeline you're in. So even like rewatching it now, I've been on Wikipedia to go like, how many years apart are these different things? Because The Witcher lives for hundreds of years, magicians live for hundreds of years. So you're like watching something and you're like, oh, this is 40 years after the previous episode, except this other storyline that I'm following is continuous throughout the whole season and just starts and finishes within a couple of weeks. And it's like all about fate and how all these things connect. And it's surprising how well of a job they've done with it. So, you know, if you're looking for that Monster of the Week thing, or if you're looking for something that's it's a bit more like feels like the old days, Jim, for you and me, you might want to check out The Witcher, Season 1 specifically, because I don't know how well Season 2 and 3 hold up, but I'll see how far I get on this rewatch.
Now through season 3, that's still Henry Cavill, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because Henry
And then they
Cavill, I do know that he left the show. Well, at least the rumor was he left the show because he didn't like the direction. He wanted it to be more like the books or the source material, and they were starting to stray a bit from that. And they moved on with I think one of the Hemsworths, right?
Yeah, Liam's taken over from Henry Cavill. And Henry Cavill, it is interesting. Like, it is not, as I said, it's not the highest quality show in some ways, but he brings so much to it because he's like, so much of it is on his shoulders. Because The Witcher, if you look at it, it's basically like someone's cool character that they made up to be awesome and badass. There's so many ways to fuck that up. Even like in the first episode, he's like doing a monologue to his horse, just kind of talking to the horse, and you're like, you should be like, fuck this, but you're like, he clearly like likes the books or the games and like is deep into it, and like he just does a great job of like brooding and has a little bit of light comedy to it as well. You know, it's just you really need him to carry the show, and so it's a very weird decision to just kind of have someone else in there, even if it wasn't sort of within anyone's control. I don't even remember the drama because by the time that was happening, I was kind of like, hasn't that show gone to shit anyways? You know.
And I think it was even, but like it kind of came out before the 3rd season premiered, so it was
yes, and I think that tanked everyone's interest, and that's part of why I was like, why am I going to commit to watching all these other episodes when like you're just going to change things up anyway and like recast the main character for next season? But apparently it's coming back for so season 4 is going to come out, and then season 5 is supposed to be the last one, as far as I've heard.
Because Henry Cavill is famous daddy nerd because like he's big buff hunk, but he also puts out videos of him like building his computer and talking about video games and stuff. So he's nerd zaddy, if you will.
He would definitely not play The Witcher on Switch.
I mean, I have been in a weird state with TV because some things I've been saving because I'm about to go on a long flight soon. So you're intriguing me with what you're saying about The Witcher. So I like what I'm hearing.
Yeah, just some classic good fantasy for you. And, you know, it's if you go into it, I think that's the difference where I watched it the first time and I was like, I did enjoy it. I was like, this is great. And honestly, that's why I bought the game on the Switch. I remember now because I was like, I always wanted to play it and I got it and then basically never played it. And then it, you know, it's kind of, does it hold up? Who knows? But it doesn't matter. Just enjoy the seasons you enjoy. Just rewatch them when it's been long enough time that you don't remember all the details. And that's how we should all consume media.
What TV shows have you been watching? Tell me, I gotta know.
Now, the only other thing I've been watching is what we're going to talk about. Did you watch anything else besides Chimp Crazy?
Absolutely not. Let's get into it.
All right, well, let's
Chimp Crazy. Here we go. That
now,
was my attempt at a monkey sound. It didn't work out great.
Now, Chimp Crazy, we talked a little bit about it last week. It's the new docu-series on Max, the one to watch for HBO, from the people that brought us Tiger King. And we're back in the world of exotic pets. And this time we're focusing on chimpanzees. And Jacob, you hadn't seen the first episode last week, but you've watched both now? Because
yes.
As of this recording, 2 episodes are out. It is week to week. So what's your take? What do you think about the first episode?
Yeah, I mean, I was drawn in immediately. Like when you put it on, if you have any sympathy or awareness for animals, it's kind of like you feel weird. Like I had a weird, uncomfortable feeling the whole way through, and that's kind of like in the same way that you'd watch a true crime thing for that kind of like, ooh, this is a bit bad. You're watching animals that like aren't fully being abused, but it's also like they're kept in conditions they probably shouldn't be kept in, and it's all about our human drama and how we've ended up doing this. And you're like, it's super interesting because you see these humans who are like, they care about their animals. They're just not qualified to take care of them at all, but they've convinced themselves that this is the best thing for them, and they have such an emotional connection with them. And you see all these videos of these chimpanzees doing like amazing things that you like forget that chimpanzees can do, because like when do you ever see chimpanzees besides in movies from the 90s and before, when everyone was just like, yeah, this is a great thing, which is why there's a bunch of chimpanzees just being cared for by random people, because they were like, oh no, this is a great money making scheme, we'll just get a
Yeah.
bunch of chimps and put them in movies and train them and then have no qualifications or like make sure that they're living in something approximating their natural habitat or anything. So you forget that like how human like they actually are, and how much like the rise of the Planet of the Apes, like 90% of that film could happen. And then, you know, someone's face gets torn off. Yeah, no, I enjoyed it quite a bit, but all in a sort of way of like, this is wrong, right? This is
Yeah.
wrong that I'm enjoying this, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I guess to be fair, I haven't watched a lot of more recent documentaries. I mean, obviously Netflix is huge for documentaries. I mean, I've watched a couple true crime series here and there, but this was like, watching this, I was like, oh yeah, this is how a fucking documentary gets made. Like whatever it is that these other ones are missing, this has it. Like the filmmaking, the editing is really on point, and just a lot of the intrigue, like even the idea of like, I mentioned it last week, how he has to get a proxy director because he's known more as because Tiger King was such a smash hit. The director of the series is he's kind of outed, if you will, where like people are have their guards up more. They don't want to talk to him. And this doesn't feel like a cheap gimmick of the documentary. You know, a lot of documentaries suffer from this idea where the filmmakers put themselves in it, and sometimes that could be great, and a lot of times that it's like self-serving. It doesn't feel like it's a self-serving thing. It feels like it's an organic just choice they have to make, but it also adds that intrigue of like, ooh, like shit's getting real. Like we're dealing in subterfuge now. Like we're undercover. Like what if they find out? And yeah, we start to get in the inner work, like the history of this chimpanzee, like exotic animal brokers, and then also just like the current state of it. And we start to meet some of these people, and we see like how much money really is can be made from this. And what I like so far is, like I had mentioned last week after watching episode 1, like I had a little bit more sympathy for was it Tanya Haddix, I believe.
Yeah.
I had a lot more sympathy for her in the first episode, but it's also the way they dole out information. It's very deliberate and well done, because then in the second episode, you start to see how, like these lavish homes she lives in. Because initially, and even in the first episode, I'm thinking like, oh, how are they like paying for this stuff? And then in the second episode, they expand on that more, because you see that she has this huge like house. She has all these other animals as well. But then they start to peel back more layers, and you realize she is one of these like exotic pet brokers, and you know they're making thousands of dollars, or tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars, you know, pulling these wild animals and just selling them to fucking God knows who. I feel like if you want to go and adopt a dog, some places like want to have a meeting with you. They want to visit your home.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think any of that's happening here. You're hearing voicemails like intercut on a montage, and someone's like, I need some zebra tigers, or whatever the fuck. I need this. And you know, it's just like, all right, well, if you got money, here you go. So it's like, oh, okay. I like what they're doing, because I was kind of feeling for her a little bit more, and now I'm second guessing that. And they play out more and more of the mystery. I mean, I guess I don't want to give away too many details, but I mean, the end of the first episode, at least, we end with like there's this battle going on with PETA and these chimpanzees that are held in this captivity. And PETA wins this initial battle, and they get to take them into their custody to bring them to an actual sanctuary where they could live. But then the big mystery, the driving force to lead you into the second episode, is one of the chimps is missing. And it's like, where is it? And it's like, it's just geniusly played out. Like, I get like talking about what I was talking about with Bad Monkey. There's no hook. There's no urgency. There's kind of a reveal at the end. Like, this is very much in that style of like, oh shit, I want to watch the next episode.
Yeah.
And it feels like, and again, maybe I'm being unfair because I haven't watched a lot of the more recent Netflix documentaries. Even though this was not that long ago, there's years behind it. Like, I mean, most of it takes place between like, say, like 2018 through 2023 so far. But some of these other documentaries you watch, it feels like they were like, let's do a documentary real quick, and they try to like do whatever they can in a year and throw something together. At least this feels like there was some time put into it before releasing it.
Well, a lot of what people think of as documentaries now is just kind of blurring the line with edutainment and kind of almost like similar to the video essay genre on YouTube. It's like a lot, people just shit them out with talking heads, stock footage, reenactments, and motion graphics. All stuff you can put together in a week or a month or whatever. Like the documentaries that I've always enjoyed are the ones where you follow real individuals and the director to some extent tries to be a fly on the wall but ends up getting involved in whatever the thing is, you know. And it's like an art form that's it's not worth pursuing in most cases because you probably don't have enough of an interesting topic to warrant that level of dedication and work, unless it's like someone doing a film about themselves or their friends and it's like almost merging with like vlog type format, or I don't know, something experimental, or like reality TV is kind of a way of doing a documentary, right? But yeah, no, it definitely, in the same way that you said, it's like it makes you appreciate the craft and the artistry that goes into documentary filmmaking, which is funny because the maker of this is not like from a filmmaking background. The reason he can afford making these is he has like a fortune made from like founding a bunch of clubs and hotels and things, and then he's just really into exotic animals and stuff himself, and kind of got to see kind of the weird sides, which is all the sides really of that whole business and industry, and he's brought that to light in Tiger King and now in this. So yeah, and as you said, like all the phone calls, like I think if you really want to have an animal you're not supposed to have, like you're already, like the prerequisite is you're probably a weirdo already. Like if you're that into it that you're paying 40 grand for any animal, you probably shouldn't have it. But yeah, no, you better dig up that spoiler wrap because I'm definitely getting into how episode 2 ended here in a second.
Okay. Yeah.
But,
yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, we'll keep it light for now. But yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I'm glad it's 4 episodes because it feels like if they could have easily stretched this out to like 10 episodes or something like that and added a bunch of padding. They have years of footage, but it moves at a good clip. It goes into a bunch of different topics. You see details of this famous chimp attack that happened decade ago or something like that.
Yeah, 2009. What's great about that, I mean, personally anyways, is because I'm well versed in that story because on my podcast, Jim and Them, we followed that for quite a bit, and even past the initial, like, it was headlines when it happened, obviously, but we followed it for a while. Anytime there was updates, like, years later, because, like, I know her name, like, Charla Nash, like, I knew her name, like, without even, like, them bringing it up when they hinted at it in the coming up on episode 2. But it's also, it's brought up in it makes sense. Like, it's laying out the dangers of, you know, it's a wild animal if it's not obvious enough, but like what can happen. And they even left out like one of the details is like, and I'm pretty sure we confirmed this. I remember when we were going through the case, the lady who owned it was Travis, I believe, Travis the chimp. When her friend was like savagely attacked by this chimp. And when she was trying to escape, like she ran in the car. And they do mention on the documentary that Travis knew how to drive, but he also knew how to like unlock the door. Like he knew how to get into the car. So even if like it really is something out of a horror film, you get in the car and lock the doors, but then the chimp comes out and he's just like holding the keys. Like he knows what's going on. But yeah, and the way it's used, the way they lay out the details and the way it cuts back to our main character, it's all genius, like well done, well thought out filmmaking.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Do you want to talk spoilers?
Yes, although I'd say first, like, there's when looking into this, I'm like, people are talking about ethical concerns with this documentary, and I do think there are good points. But interestingly, like people are talking about the ethical concerns of like the fake director, which with that I was like, that seems fine. Like,
No, I agree.
I don't know what's in me where I'm like, oh no, yeah, like you should do that. More so, I would have ethical concerns about like stuff that's going to be behind the spoiler warning, which we won't even be able to fully discuss until the whole show is out. But yeah, we're going to do spoilers specifically just for episode 2 after this warning. Sorry, Jim.
Sure. Yeah. And one other thing before we get into spoilers, because what I was going to say, so one of the best things about like a documentary like this is when you have these moments of like, I can't believe this person's letting them film. And, you know, I mean, the Jinx was a big one, even though the Jinx was kind of in secret. I mean, spoilers for the Jinx was an HBO true crime documentary. I think they're doing the sequel for it now, or it's already aired or something. Is when they ended, the guy had a live mic on and he went in the bathroom and they kind of caught him in audio being like, I did it. I killed him. Like, and it like broke this old, you know, cold case wide open. Or even like, again, Tiger King, like Joe Exotic. When you have some of these characters where you're like, I can't believe this person is that comfortable, whether it be it's just because they're that comfortable or just because they love the attention. Like I could see some of these characters are just, you're making a movie about me, I'll do anything. I'll suffer any consequences because this is great, the amount of attention I have, So, yeah. That's when those moments are like, I can't believe this is happening. But then again, like the proxy director, yeah, I don't really have a problem with it because it very well could have just been some other guy. Like it's not like they're lying that they're making a documentary. Like they're still making a documentary. I mean, I guess I get it. It's not the actual director, but you're still giving them the access. I don't know. Yeah. I don't have a problem with it.
The only like potential ethical concern in the first episode is that you start to see that they have very little, I guess, respect for the rule of law anyway, where they're like, oh yes, everyone has to be out of the, you know, sanctuary, because basically in the first episode they're going to take all the chimps away, as you said earlier, and they're like, no cameras are allowed on the property, and they like shoo them off the property, and that's in the court order. Tanya Haddox has to be off the property. They've installed like 500 cameras all over this
love
place,
that,
right?
though.
So we get great footage, and I'm like, yeah, no, that's fine, but maybe we cross the line later on, but we'll get into it.
Yeah, well, mostly because again, like we're not trusting anyone. That's why I like that. Where it's like, it's a weird request to be like no cameras on the premises because the authorities are here. But anyway, yeah, let's get into spoilers. If I can pull this up here, I should have had it ready.
Fuck it, we'll do it live.
Ayo, this is AI generated bullshit. AI generated bullshit by AI Jakob. Here we go. Spoiler alert, we're gonna spill the beans. No turning back, no living in your dreams. We'll reveal secrets and we'll blow your mind. Darth Vader was dead the whole time, and in The Sixth Sense, Bruce Willis was that kid's dad. Dumbledore killed Snape, made all the kids sad. Man, you can't control these spoiler bars, and the planet of the apes was actually Mars.
How apropos.
There you go. Spoilers from here on out. Well, yeah, when this episode ended, just to jump real quickly to the end, because the whole episode is like, where's Tonka? What's going on with Tonka? She's saying that Tonka died and they cremated him. And usually I try not to talk to Jakob about a show because I'm like, oh, we're already going to talk about it. But as soon as it ended, I messaged him and I said, no fucking way. Because I was initially caught off guard because we go through this whole thing and then we show her in her Zoom court, like video court on her computer. And the way they edit this and mine the comedy is great as well. Like we have the PETA lawyer freezing up on his Zoom and even the judge has to be like, yeah, you're frozen. And then it's like, oh, I'm sorry. Like just the absurdity of having Zoom court is fun. They have her emotional acting of trying to tell the story, but she's trying to really put on how affected she is, and she's just being so melodramatic. And what's great is then they throw in the classic documentary like remake of what her account of the story of how when she found Tonka dead in his cage or whatever. And then she has this small victory. It's clearly not like a win-win, but it is. It's a victory. And she's excited about it, like immediately closes her camera because the judge is like, look, I don't believe you. You're telling a lot of lies, but there's not enough evidence here to also say that the chimp is dead. So PETA would need to come back with some more solid evidence.
Or to say that the
off of.
chimp is alive, rather. Right?
Yeah, I'm
Or
sorry.
like either way.
Either way. Like, we can't say that the chimp is alive because even though Tanya is clearly a liar, like she keeps making up stories, but there's nothing here to pursue. And so she immediately closes the laptop, is excited, and she goes to her husband and is like, we won. And he's like, well, you won. So even he's like, well, so far. And she goes, we just have to keep them hidden. And I'm like, did she fucking say that? I had to rewind it. I'm like, wait a minute. Like, they just let that drop in the moment. Like, that's how comfortable she is. She's just admitting that it's... And then they go a step further where we have, like, what I assume is like a secret, like a hidden camera, like based on the quality, where they're following her downstairs somewhere. I assume it's not her house because she invited him to the house, but maybe it's a hidden place. And then there's fucking Tonka hidden in a basement somewhere in a cage. And then it cuts to credits, and I was like, holy fucking shit, this show's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely entertaining, right? And we've spent the full like hour building up that tension in the editing and like the question of like, is Tonka alive or not? They're saying Tonka died, and she seems kind of crazy, obviously, but she's also saying like, what would be the point of this? How could I do this? It wouldn't be possible. And you're like, yeah, I mean, it kind of sound like that. Chimpanzee had been kept inside, and it did have a bad heart or whatever, I guess, and stuff like that. So you're like, I guess it could have died, and they have to do the whole thing where like the PETA hires someone to go and burn bones to show that even if they burned them in the way they said, it wouldn't have been the powder that they have. It would have fragments of bones in it, and they don't believe that the chimp is actually dead. All of that stuff is masterfully put together because you're kind of playing with the audience belief of like what is and isn't happening there. And then of course at the end the Tonka, the chimp is still alive. And I kind of knew when you texted me, but I kind of knew anyway because I was like, if the chimp is dead, what are the next 2 episodes going to be? There's more than twice of what I've watched so far left. So where are we going here? You also kind of know when she's in that court thing and she's talking about it and crying about finding Tonka dead, and you're like, I've seen her in this documentary get really emotional about these chimps because like she does really care about them, but this is like proper crocodile tears. Like you can tell she's faking it, which is so interesting because like, yeah, I don't know. It's as you said in the first episode, she comes off as quite sympathetic, and like it's kind of like a deep dive into this person over years and years of their weird and illegal behavior. But yeah, so I read a bit about it. There's a good article in the LA Times. The headline is, "For Chimp Crazy director Eric Good, quote, the end justifies the means." And this kind of interviews him and has a bunch of other details that is worth reading. But Jim, don't read it because you don't want to be spoiled on any of what's coming next in the next couple episodes. And I'll omit any parts that would give a spoiler for future episodes.
Well,
but I will say...
Before you do, I just want to I understand it's crazy. My thought process here is crazy, where it's like, this is real life, and I could just figure it out. But like, I want to see it play out in a TV show. I get that's kind of absurd, but that's just how I want to. That's how I want to take this story in.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm not going to tell you like stuff that's in the future from the timeline of where we are in the show, but I will tell you some of leading up to where we are at the end of this episode, if that's okay. So I'll let you know that almost immediately after Tonka was kidnapped by Haddix, she let the documentary crew in on the secret. So they were aware of it for a longer period of time, which makes sense. Looking at the episode and the way it's edited, you're like, she's talking to them, doing a lot of like talking head type situations where she's laying out the case basically for why she clearly doesn't have the chimp. And you're like, well, she seems very convincing and everything, but it's because they're kind of making another fake documentary within this documentary where she clearly believes that this fake director that Good hired is on her side, showing her side of the story, right? So she's on board and talking to the camera and helping lay out the case for why it's not real. And then there's the secret layer where, like, obviously we are making the actual documentary and we know you have the chimp. And that's where it gets ethically fucked up for me personally, because now, and this is just a quote from the article here, but as it points out, the crew, meanwhile, were growing concerned. Haddix was in the dark, and now they had unwittingly become accessories to a crime. Also goes into how Alan Cumming, who's the actor who was in the movie with Tonka in the 90s, him and PETA, they offered a $20,000 reward for any information about the chimp's whereabouts. And as you know, this goes on for months. They're wasting time in court. Like, the hearing that's on Zoom there, it's mentioned that it's like the fourth contempt hearing. Like, the PETA is trying to hold her in contempt of court, but they don't have enough evidence. They hire this specialist who's worked on, like, follow-ups of human rights abuses and all these things, comes to burn some pig bones just to get the evidence. And the documentary crew is there. They all know that the chimp is just in Tanya's fucking basement. And Good says, I'm sure it was hard for the crew to have to understand that maybe there's a greater good in not acting so quickly. And I'll say the only greater good is that it's making a good film. I don't think that it's not a greater good for the animal, right? And that's where I'm like, clearly your priority is making entertaining television, and that's fine, but let's dispense, like, this is as bad as Jerry Springer, except the people on Jerry Springer are humans who are brought in willingly. Tonka is kept in this cage, not allowed to go outside or do anything in conditions that it does not deserve to be kept in for months and months. You are aware of it as the director. You choose to do nothing because you want to make a good film. That's where the ethical weirdness comes in for me personally.
I mean, I'd have to see how this plays out in the end, but I could see an argument of, like, you're letting her sink herself even lower. Whereas if you turn her in immediately, does she just get a slap on the wrist because she attempted to do something and blah, blah, blah? Whereas if you continue to let her lie and give her more rope to hang herself with, is there potential to get her out of this business in general, as far as, like, the exotic pets are concerned, being this middleman that she is, where she's getting animals for people and taking more animals into her own care. It's very similar to something, I mean, again, these are filmmakers, they're not authorities, but it's very similar to what you would see with, like, the authorities, where they're like, well, you know, we let this go because we're after a bigger fish to fry or something like that. Now, again, I don't know how this plays out yet, where if she does still just get a slap on the wrist, so maybe what I'm saying doesn't matter.
Sure.
But at least I could see an argument there. I could see that there could be something to do. I mean, obviously still getting a better film out of it, but also I could see an argument for something more.
Yeah, I think it's just, like, the question you have to ask. Like you said last week, Tiger King, we've all kind of turned on it over time collectively. We're all like, we were just COVID crazy. What the fuck was that about? But I think the thing you have to ask when you're watching something that is a documentary that pulls on real events is this exploitative towards the subject? And if so, in what way? I have no problem with it being exploitative towards Tanya Haddix and, like, lying to her with a fake director, right? The question, especially dealing with exotic animals and situations like this where they might be kept in situations they shouldn't be kept in, it's like, at what point are the filmmakers filming this to bring attention to it, and at what point are they complicit in what is happening? And that's obviously where the line is crossed, where it wasn't a couple of weeks that she kept this chimp in her basement under wraps secretly. It was a number of months. And I also don't know all the details of how this plays out. I've read a little bit about it and we'll get more into it next week. But for me, I'm still going to watch the episodes 3 and 4 and probably enjoy it, but it's going to feel more like a guilty pleasure than it did before the twist of like, oh, the crew knew the whole time and they're just kind of choosing to let justice not be done for these chimps who are kept in unsanitary conditions.
Well, but also to be fair, I mean, again, I don't have prepared examples for this, but I have to also imagine there have been other documentaries made, whether it be on like domestic violence or, you know, addiction and stuff like that, where sometimes the film does become king of all, where you're witnessing crimes or you're witnessing other people that are being taken advantage of or suffering, but you don't immediately shut it down for the film. So I think that's not a new question, especially when it comes to documentaries. So yeah, I do think it's an interesting question to explore. Again, I can't think of examples offhand, but I'm almost positive I've seen different documentaries where you get into some of these murky waters here of when you're supposed to step in or when you're supposed to just be legitimately a fly in the wall. But yeah, I feel like to me, it still lends itself to being a good film. Because sometimes, you know, as crazy as it sounds, like it is more about the film than it is about whatever's going on in the real world. I'm looking through a camera. This isn't really happening. I'm seeing it on a camera right now.
Yeah, and yes. No, I mean, I probably would have done the same thing if I was making this documentary. You get too deep into it. You're like, the film matters more than anything in the world, and you're just making like a TikTok or something. Like, you get there so quickly as well. Like, and we both make films to some extent. You get so hooked on it so quickly, and it is kind of like watching a car crash in slow motion. Like, how could you not keep filming and see how deep Tanya Haddox digs this hole for herself before you make the call of like, when do I need to pull the plug on what the fuck is happening here? So it's all very interesting. I just think that, you know, in the first episode, they were talking about the whatever they called it, the foundation, the place where they had all the chimps. There was someone there who had been working there for years and gradually realized this is not the right way for these animals to be kept. They're the person who went in with a secret camera, filmed material of this place where they're kept in places where they're not supposed to be, brought it to PETA, and that's how the lawsuit started of getting them out of there and getting them into a proper habitat. And the thing she said, like they asked, like, do you have any regrets? And she said, I wish I had done it sooner. Yeah. And Eric Good never said this. I don't think he's ever going to say it. He sees the greater good in the making of his film. And I just think that's fine. You're just clearly not, like, clearly the animals aren't your top priority. Your top priority is the film. And you know what? It's a great film. I'll watch the rest of it. Keep chatting about it. But it gave me the ick to that level, but only in that, like, it's great, mind-blowing television. And then I'm also like, ooh, that's kind of weird. But, you know, we'll go from there. We'll see episodes 3 and 4, see what we think at the end of it.
Yeah, I mean, so far I haven't changed any opinion on it whatsoever. I completely, at least at this point, depending on how things play out or what kind of timeline, maybe it would change. But I kind of completely understand the decision, at least from where I'm at right now.
Yeah. No, and I respect that as well. But it's kind of like when I saw people talking about, like, oh, is this documentary unethical? And I'm like clicking into it and it's like, he hired a fake director. I'm like, yeah, who gives a shit about that part? What about the fucking chimpanzee? But, you know. Well, either way, some of the most compelling television I've seen in a while. Shocking that we're the only people talking about it alongside the official Chimp Crazy podcast.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to see the rest of the episodes, to see how this plays out. Yeah, if you're not watching it, you should be.
And don't worry, you don't need to go and listen to the official Chimp Crazy podcast, because I will listen to it for next week, and then I'll give you a to-pat segment where I tell you anything interesting they might have said.
I love it. Well, I guess on that then, you can reach us at showswhatyouknowshow@gmail.com. Have you watched Chimp Crazy? What do you think about it? Or what shows are you watching? Of course, you can find more of our shows at showswhichyouknow.com. Like we mentioned, we have Blank Meets Blank. We have the podcast about television. Jakob also has Real History. We got the buck doesn't stop here, baby. We got much more content ready to go at showswhichyouknow.com.
Yes, and all we have left to say after that is the thing we say at the end of every episode. 3, 2, 1. No more monkey business.
We our show's what you know. We'll always watch TV. And if you think we can't, we'll watch more and you'll see. That's why the people of the web believe in Jim from Las Vegas and Jakob from Sweden.